The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about Adobe Target and how Adobe Target can be used to deliver a personalization and testing program that is pretty special. We are Ratio Squared. We are an agency based in London in the UK who are leveraging Adobe Target as well as other technology to deliver experimentation programs for our clients. There's going to be a few areas that we're going to talk about today. Some of them will be directly related to the technology, Adobe Target, and some of it will be more agnostic to the technology, like where we're talking about research and strategy. The presentation is going to be focused on how Adobe Target can be used from the perspective of personalization, and that's because I think it is where Adobe Target really shines relative to some other testing platforms that are on the market. And it is perhaps one of the least understood areas of the platform, especially as it relates to the new AI and machine learning features, and also data integration, which we'll touch on later on in the platform. So firstly, we're going to go through a refresher on what Adobe Target can actually deliver from the point of view of personalization. Then we're going to talk about how and why data needs to be integrated in order to deliver that personalization. We're going to look at a technology agnostic approach to research and strategy, which will help us understand how and where we should be using Adobe Target, and then go through a few case studies, both from our clients and from other leading clients of Adobe, and look at how Adobe Target is being used in quite sophisticated ways out in the market. So first, as I mentioned, I'd like to talk a little bit around how Adobe Target can actually be used to deliver personalization, because this has, over the past several years, come quite some way in terms of the levels of sophistication that it can get to. There are, broadly speaking, 5 different ways in which Adobe Target can deliver personalization, which are, as you can see on the screen: audience targeting, auto allocation, recommendations, auto target, and automated personalization. The difference between some of these isn't necessarily that obvious. One thing that I would note is that as far as recommendations, auto target, and automated personalization, these are features which are only actually available as part of the Target Premium license. So if you have Target Standard and you like the sound of what these capabilities can do, then you should have a chat to Adobe about possibly getting upgraded. So experience targeting is where you have a specific audience that you want to deliver an experience or an activity to, whether that's as part of a test to see whether that audience responds better to a personalized experience, or whether it's part of a kind of a 100% delivery, always on activity. So in simple terms, you define an audience, e.g. for Ratio Squared, that could be visitors that are previously looking at our customer experience content. And then you set up two different experiences as part of that, and you can run a test between the two. Auto allocation is a new feature that has been introduced as part of the part of Adobe's Sensei machine learning algorithms, and this is actually a pretty nice thing to apply, not just to personalized activities, but to other activities as well. So auto allocation, what it does is determine when you're running an experience, or a test I should say, as in the depiction with 4 different variations. Auto allocate lets you, when Adobe Target detects that one of those options is working better, it will start allocating more and more traffic to that particular variation. And the benefit of that is that if there are experiences that are performing particularly poorly, you don't need to suffer the loss of the traffic that's seeing that poorly performing experience and not converting as well. you can immediately start to siphon traffic towards the better performing experiences. Adobe Recommendations has been around for a while, but has recently had some pretty cool enhancements. So this is, if you're not familiar with the idea of a recommendations engine, it's where you can create some rules-based suggestions on content that your visitors might want to consider exploring, other than what they're already looking at, content or products. One of the great advancements recently is that where you have different attributes that are within the recommendations algorithm, as you can see on my screen, you can actually apply a weighting to those different attributes, depending on what you think is actually more or less relevant to how it should be determined that content should be shown. But the most exciting two features of Adobe Target as it relates to personalization are also being delivered by the Sensei machine learning algorithm, and that is auto target and auto personalization. And these two we have found are a little bit confusing in terms of the differences between them and where the applications of them might be. So auto target is where you are constructing an entire experience and more than one entire experience. And Adobe Target is testing that experience or those experiences against visitors with different attributes in order to understand which audience or which set of attributes responds better on the basis of the success metric that you've nominated. And then it will progressively allocate more and more traffic, matching those attributes to the experience that it responds better to. So one of the problems with personalization when we're talking about the experience targeting form of personalization, as I talked about before, is that there's a scalability issue. Even to work out one single audience that should see you hypothesize should see one single tweaked audience experience, there's an overhead in terms of time that needs to be invested in doing the analysis in order to work that out. There's an overhead in terms of working out what content should be most appropriate for them and so on. Whereas using auto target and auto personalization, all you really need to do is create the content, and then Adobe Target will work out who should actually see what. Auto personalization, as opposed to auto target, is where you have a series of offers which make up in totality an experience, which could be different headlines, it could be different products that you might want to show, it could be different imagery, and Adobe Target works out which is the best combination of those to show each visitor. So it's kind of like a multivariate test that it's conducting, but not just an A/B multivariate test. It's progressively working out which combination of offers should be shown to each set of users. So these are really all exciting features, and one of the things to understand and recognize, though, when you're looking to leverage these features, is that data, whether that be data driving the experience targeting or whether that be data that is driving the algorithms that are driving auto target and personalization, is the lifeblood of this, of these efforts. And the reality is that actually Adobe Target on its own out of the box isn't collecting that much data about visitors. And so if we want to use these tactics effectively, we need to bolster it with data from other sources. So it's a common misconception that Adobe Target is sitting there collecting kind of clickstream data about your website visitors. Clickstream data being data that reflects the overall journey that someone's taken through your website, all the pages that they visited and the interactions that they've had, and so on. Actually, Target is collecting a far more limited amount of information about each visitor that can be used in these algorithms or for targeting. So the first thing to note is that out of the box, Target is collecting information about the current visit only, or it's considering information about the current visit only with respect to that targeting. So it's looking at, for example, what type of device someone is accessing your website with, what their browser and operating system is. It's looking at what the date and time is, what is the network provider or the internet service provider that they're using to access your website, where are they geographically, and it's looking at information about the pages that they visited, but only a limited amount of information, being what was their entry page, or where did they land on the website, what page are they on currently, and what page were they referred from immediately preceding their current page view. And it is also ingesting information in the URL that relating to campaign. So if you're including tracking information there, or if it can tell through the referrer that you've come from Google, for argument's sake, it's also collecting that information. But that is only a small subset of all the fantastic information, one, that can be available to us from the clickstream data that I was talking about, or two, that might exist elsewhere in the organization. So it's not collecting the in-page interactions, it's not collecting context about the call to actions that people are clicking or the menus that they're expanding. It's not collecting information about the second or third page in their visit, if they're on their fifth page, let's say, and it's only knowing about the first and the most recent one. Obviously, it's also not collecting information about where transactions occurred or what products people were interested in. So in order to actually do some really cool and exciting stuff with this personalization, we need to share more information with Target so that we can create better segmentation and better machine learning outcomes. And this is not exactly an easy area to understand as far as the options that you have to share information with Target. And so what we'll go through now is a few of the options that can be used to get data in so that we can create more relevant and personalized experiences. So the first method that's available to us is that, as you would be aware, Adobe Target is sitting within the Experience Cloud along with other Adobe products like Audience Manager and Analytics. And segments that are created in Adobe Audience Manager and Analytics can be shared by the Experience Cloud to Target and then used to target a specific activity. And they're immediately and automatically used in the machine learning algorithms that are driving the auto-target, auto-personalization. So this would be a really strong method if, for example, you had determined through analytics that there was a particular journey that occurred over more than one or more visits that you wanted to be able to target with a specific experience. This is what you could use to achieve that. Or if, as I mentioned, you wanted to target people on the basis of some in-page interaction, like a menu they'd expanded or a call to action they clicked, and where that information is tracked in Analytics or Audience Manager. These are the use cases for sharing audiences via the Experience Cloud. There are some pitfalls with these different options, which you can find in the Adobe help documentation if you're curious. But for example, where we're using Adobe Analytics to share a segment with the Experience Cloud and then with Adobe Target, it takes 24 to 48 hours for that segment to propagate through to Adobe Target in order to actually, in order that you can start using it to target visitors. So once you share it, you'll immediately see it in Target, but Analytics doesn't actually start telling Target for 24 to 48 hours which visitors fall into the segment. Audience Library, by contrast, has weaker segmentation options than Adobe Analytics. So you might be able to target based on some specific EVA or prop that's been triggered by a visitor, but you're not going to be able to set up as granular or as complex segmentation within that product as you can in Analytics. And Audience Manager, obviously one of the strengths there is that you can bring in third-party data or second and third-party data and not just rely on what is in, not just rely on what you're collecting on your website. Another option that you have available to you is to expand the the so-called visitor profile within Adobe Target by using profile scripts and profile attributes. And there's a few different ways that you can use these. So I guess the first thing to say is that this is a method that you should be using when you have information that can be available on the page at the time that it loads. So the sorts of things that the sorts of ways in which you're using this method are through the use of profile scripts, where for argument's sake, you're writing up a little bit of JavaScript that checks the page to see whether it has a certain attribute, and if so, returns a certain value. Or if you are using, or you can push information directly into Target when it first loads on the page. So the way that we might use this, for example, would be to start storing in Adobe Target the profile categories, the product categories, I should say, that people looked at. So we can write a script, a profile script that checks checks a particular part of the HTML to grab the value as far as the product category, and then we can start storing information about what product categories people are interested in. Obviously, it's not the case, regrettably, that we are also fortunate as to have a rich amount of information in our data layers or otherwise available on the page about our users. And so there are other methods to kind of upload data to Adobe Target relating to specific visitors. So one of them is that we can use this Experience Cloud customer attributes. So what you can do here is to create a data file which contains additional information about a specific set of visitors, such as what might be contained within CRM, or that you might be getting through propensity modeling from your data science team, if you're lucky enough to have such a team. The benefit of this, as opposed to other methods of uploading data to Adobe Target, is that it supports an upload for users that Adobe Target is yet to identify. So you can identify, you can upload data about everyone in your CRM system, setting aside any GDPR considerations around doing that. And as and when Adobe Target finds a match against against whatever matching identifier you're using, then it will immediately start to include those people in any audiences that have been defined on the basis of that, of attributes held within that report. Finally, we have the single or bulk upload API. So where the Experience Cloud customer attributes, you're actually sending the information to an FTP in a CSV file or what have you. In this instance, there's actually an API that can be used to either tell Adobe about what attribute updates should be made for a specific visitor. That would be the single profile update, or you can still send Adobe a CSV file of specific visitors. The constraint with this method is that you have to be matching based on Adobe Target ID, like there's some specific technical terminology, but suffice it to say that you're not going to be able to tell Adobe Target about a specific visitor and what attributes they might have in advance of Adobe Target actually seeing that visitor on the website for the first time. It can only be done after that visitor has come to the website for the first time. So next, I want to talk a little bit about research, insight, and strategy. And the reason that I want to touch on this, and particularly in a non-tech agnostic, in a tech agnostic way, is that when it comes to these technology and experimentation platforms, oftentimes we can view them as solutions, but actually they should be viewed as tools to solve problems. And the problems are ones that are agnostic to the technology itself. They're going to be business or customer problems that the tool can be used to solve, and that functionality I went through can be used to solve. But So when it comes to thinking about how the tool should be used, we actually don't need to think about the tool at all in the first instance. We need to think about what we're trying to achieve as a business, and or try and understand what problems our customers are having, and then think about the tool last, and think about how the tool can be used to solve those problems. So we take a process to this process of, we have a process around this, which is to identify the problems and map them to solutions, which is completely agnostic from Target itself. And then we come in at the end and actually look at what functionality we can use. So the four-step process that we use with our clients in order to develop an experimentation roadmap that really leverages this technology is firstly to define business objectives and map them to KPIs. Secondly, to conduct research and try and really get to the root cause of what customer or business problems need to be solved. The third is to develop and prioritize a specific set of hypotheses that map to each of those problems, and then also map that against what required integrations and capabilities need to be put into place in order to execute on the hypothesis. And the fourth step is to actually build and execute on the roadmap, and really use the tool. So for most of this, as I said, we're not really talking about the technology at all. We're taking a view about what in general are the problems that we need to solve for. So I want to talk about a measurement plan first. And this is really fundamental when it comes to experimentation, or indeed any marketing activity, but it's something that regrettably a lot of organizations don't have in place and haven't put robust thought about. And a measurement plan, if you're not aware, is something that ladders down from what you're trying to achieve as an organization into how the website specifically will support that, into what KPIs will help you understand whether the website is supporting that, or let you measure that specific website goal, through to what targets you should have around those KPIs, and through to what audience segmentation is particularly relevant to the KPI, to the website goal. So just a couple of things that we see that don't necessarily go right when these measurement plans are being created. Firstly, would be that when you're considering your website goals, you should be doing two things. One of which is thinking about it from a customer perspective, and what KPIs will reflect that your customers or prospective customers are actually able to achieve their objectives. And secondly, that you should look at how your website goals can help you to understand how all parts of your funnel are performing. So if we have an e-commerce website, for argument's sake, it might seem like the KPIs for your website are pretty self-explanatory. Probably you're looking at reporting on things like customer lifetime value, transactions, obviously conversion rate, revenue, average order value or basket size, number of items per order, and margin perhaps, and so on. But all of those metrics are very far down the marketing funnel, and they give you not really any direct insight into how earlier parts of the funnel are performing. So we encourage all our clients to consider metrics which reflect how successfully your clients are able to explore the products that you're on your website, for argument's sake, and things that and metrics like that which don't just reflect the downstream outcome. They actually help you understand how earlier parts of the funnel are performing. KPIs need to directly and unambiguously measure that goal. Now, again, in the case of an e-commerce website, that for many of the KPIs, it might be quite straightforward, but there are other organizations that are using, for example, a KPI like a bounce rate, and thinking that that is a reflection of customer engagement, which for a variety of reasons isn't actually true. So make sure that whatever KPI you are putting into place, it actually reflects the website goal that you're trying to measure unambiguously. And finally, we come across a lot of clients that don't have specific targets around each of those KPIs. And that is problematic because without a target, you don't actually know what is good or bad. Good or bad performance when it comes to a KPI has to be relative to something, and that is relative to targets. So try and ensure that you have all of these pieces of the puzzle in place in order to make sure that you really understand how your website's performing, and that will give you a head start on where it should be optimized. As I mentioned, we take the view that that a key part of a successful experimentation program is a really deep understanding of your customers and where their problems are, where the experience could be improved for them. And that's particularly true when it comes to personalization. So there are two things that we could borrow from user experience specialists and from service design specialists that can really help us to take our personalization and testing programs to the next level. The first one is to have a set of personas, which is more common for organizations to have. Personas are kind of semi-fictional representations of what are real and important audience segments. And a persona helps you because the reality is that that you don't just have one type of buyer. Almost no matter what the product is that you sell or the service, there are multiple buyers with each that have different needs, motivations, considerations, mental states, etc. And so by starting to think about it in terms of these different parts of the audience, rather than just thinking that you have one buyer, you can make sure that the experiences that you're creating have relevancy to as many of these important stakeholders as possible. The other thing that is a fantastic tool from UX and service design are journey maps or service blueprints. Now, this is what these tools help you to do is to understand not just what someone's experience is like at a singular point in time, but to understand what their experience is like throughout their entire journey. And by mapping the experience of one of these audience segments over an entire journey, you are really developing a deeper understanding of what their needs are at each step. And it really helps you to think more clearly about what those needs are. Service blueprint looks at this in a slightly different way, which is not so much from the customer perspective as you might look at with a journey map, but is from a business perspective. And a service blueprint helps you to look at when the customer is at any given touch point or step in this journey, what are the things that are happening behind the scenes from a business perspective that are supporting that touch point to be delivered at that point in time. And the reason that this can be helpful, particularly from a personalization perspective, is because it can help you to identify opportunities for personalization that aren't just kind of small iterations on the existing website experience, but that are a bit more transformational in terms of the experience that you're delivering. E.g., it can help you understand where possibly offline there's a part of the process that isn't particularly efficient, where maybe it could be digitized or information from the digital touch points could be supplied to that offline process to make it more efficient. Or it can help you to understand. It can help you to understand, yeah, I mean, where the opportunities are to evolve the experience by bringing things into the digital realm. So they're great tools to kind of have a much deeper understanding of the customer experience. There are lots of research methods that can help you understand also the opportunities for this to put this personalization and testing into place. So a few that we find extremely helpful at Ratio are to look at how you can engage with service teams and other stakeholders that are close to the customer, because they will have a very strong understanding of what the issues are that customers are facing, where the problems and pain points are that that can be resolved, and they also, no doubt, have effective ways of overcoming objections that customers might have. And so by asking about what the objections typically are and what the objection handling is that the customer service or sales team put into place in order to handle that objection, you can start to extract some ideas as to how, for example, your website copy could be optimized or enhanced, so that that issue is addressed even before it goes to the contact center. You should also be looking at how you can conduct journey analysis using your web analytics tools in order to understand where are the most common journeys that are taking users through your website, and how your website's actually being used. And this sort of analysis can help you understand not only where there are drop-off points, but who that drop-off point is particularly, which part of your audience is having particular problems at that drop-off point, whether that be an audience segment based on geography, based on device, based on browser, based on previous product engagement. And this can also start to give you some ideas about problems that can be solved through experimentation. And obviously, we also look at other methods of qualitative analysis, like, for example, research using tools like Hotjar, where we can ask users about their experience and try and solicit information about where there were problems or pain points, or what could be improved. One important thing to note with these surveys is that you'll get the most bang for your buck and the most relevant and effective ideas from them as far as problems go if you're asking users who actually purchase what problems they had throughout the process. And that is a tool to make sure that you're not soliciting information from users that aren't qualified or never going to buy in the first place. And usability testing, even remote usability testing, is another great tool to understand where these problems are within the experience. So you could look at using a testing platform like usertesting.com, recruiting participants that represent a key audience persona, as defined by the demographic information that you put into place when you define those personas. Ask users to complete some typical tasks, whether that to buy a specific product or try and sign up for a newsletter, or I guess whatever task is important as it relates to your business objectives and your website goals. And what you'll get is that these study participants will record their experience and go through it and actually verbally narrate where their problems are. And I love this as compared to, for example, the screen replay technology that you can also get through Hotjar, because when you're doing that screen replay, when you're watching screen replays through Hotjar, you are never, it's a needle in a haystack as to whether you're looking at the right video. How are you actually able to be sure that the specific replay that you're watching is going to be one that has a problem, or whether that problem will actually be representative of the overall user experience? And of course, when you're watching screen replays, users aren't actually giving you any verbal feedback as to what the problem is. So it's there's a lot more room for assumption to be introduced, which is a problem. At this point, we have an understanding of what a bunch of problems are with our user experience, and we need to actually start to map those to possible solutions. So just a couple of things that we suggest would be that you engage as wide a stakeholder group as possible when you are mapping to solutions to those problems, because the broader the mix of perspectives, probably the better the hypothesis will be that you create. And also, it's very helpful to try and leverage as many opportunities as possible to get buy-in from the wider organization when you're running an effective experimentation program. And bringing stakeholders outside of the CRO team into the process is certainly a way that you can achieve that. And to make sure that you are using a prioritization framework that lets you objectively determine what order those hypotheses should be executed on. And there are a bunch out there, but the one that we like to use is the PI framework from Wider Funnel, which is, in layman's terms, looking at what is the potential impact of something going to be versus how easy is it to execute. And the balance of those two factors should give you a guide as to what you should actually be doing first. So at this point, we have a bunch of prioritized hypotheses, and we should be looking to build a roadmap. So a few things that we think a effective roadmap should include is that it should have some level of segmentation. So don't just build one roadmap for your entire CRO program or your entire personalization program. Look at how you can build a segmented roadmap by KPI or business objectives that you're trying to solve for, by what stage in the journey you're targeting these initiatives to, or by even what audience persona you're looking at improving experience for. This is helpful because it lets you understand or broaden your mindset a little bit as far as how much you could be doing at any one time, because that is one of the key factors in how successful your optimization program will be, is how much testing you're doing relative to what your website can support based on the journeys and audiences that form it. The other thing you should be looking to do here is to map the activities to what integrations and technology enablement will facilitate each of those activities. So is it the case that for a particular activity, you're going to need your data science team to prepare you for some modeling, to prepare a model for you rather, that you can upload into Target? Or is it the case that you need to make sure that you have an extract from your CRM of some particular offline factor, and obviously making sure that you're considering these things before you actually plan on executing the activity means things run as seamlessly as possible, because you can immediately execute the activity because you've already put in place the prerequisites. Okay, so with all of that aside, I want to walk through a few examples of how some organizations in the market are using Adobe Target to deliver some pretty fantastic personalized experiences. So firstly, I want to look at Natwest, and this is an example that many organizations could learn from when it comes to constructing a personalized experience. So Natwest have this concept of a power pyramid, which is a very powerful one, and similar to what our thinking is around personalization. So this power pyramid approach is basically on the chart that you can see it, is considering that the most effective personalized experiences, i.e. that drive the greatest uplifts and that create the most relevance, will be those that are targeting only a smaller part of the audience. So for example, if you're bringing information in from your CRM, well, that's all well and good, and it's going to allow you to deliver a fantastic and highly tailored experience. But you must also consider that that information is only going to be relevant for the small part of your audience that you can identify, and it would do nothing for the anonymous visitors. Conversely, if you build a personalized experience that targets some contextual attribute of your anonymous audience, let's say you service both the United Kingdom and the United States, 50% of your visitors come from each, and you create an experience relevant to each of those groups based using geo-targeting, you'd have to consider that in that instance, it's not going to be a highly relevant experience, because by virtue of the fact that you're only leveraging one attribute that's shared by half of your audience. So this power pyramid idea lets you look at how you can deliver multiple layers of personalization that target progressively smaller audience segments and progressively deliver more and more relevance and value. And Natwest have used this approach in order actually to deliver their entire homepage. So the starting point for them is that before they show any offer to anyone, they try and make sure that that visitor is actually eligible for the offer. That's important to them as a financial services organization. But from there, they're looking at segmentation in order to deliver the relevant experience, and that's where we're talking about contextual elements about visitors, such as the marketing channel that they come from argument's sake. From there, they're looking at modeled segments using statistics, and then interest-based segments, which are where visitors have actually already expressed an interest in a specific product, and they're using all of these different audience segments in order to construct actually a homepage that is unique for almost any visitor that looks at it. And it's a really powerful example of how personalization can work well. We've used a similar approach to delivering personalization for a leading holiday company. So we've looked at, firstly, for example, from a context perspective, geolocation, because we found that users from specific parts of the world were interested in particular in holidays in particular other parts of the world. So for example, maybe people in the United States are particularly interested in going to Australia, or Australians are particularly interested in going to Europe, and so on. We built in behavioral-based personalization, looking at how when someone has expressed indirectly an interest in a particular, or we could infer an interest in a particular destination, we could leverage that in order to refine their experience further the next time they come back to the website. And then we've looked at CRM triggers and the explicit intent that's provided by users, whether that be flags in the CRM about what holiday in particular a user is interested in, or whether a user has favorited a tour in particular. And these let us close the loop with the offline data and make sure that the website is reflecting the totality of the user experience with the brand. Another way in which Adobe Target has been particularly powerful for us in creating a more relevant experience is with a global bank that we've been working with to leverage this product. So just to set the scene a little bit, we conducted analysis in Adobe Analytics around the navigation menu behavior of users on that bank's website. And this visual representation is my attempt to reflect in an anonymous way what that navigation more or less looked like. So what we found when we conducted analysis in Adobe Analytics is that only a small percentage of users who opened the navigation actually clicked a link. And you would have to say we were looking at a micro KPI for the navigation menu, or trying to understand how effective it was, or how effectively users were able to use it. Whether or not they could find a link to click is a pretty good one. So what we did first was to use the standard A/B testing features in Adobe Target in order to evaluate whether there was a better set of quick links that could be presented to users, as depicted on the right-hand side of that wireframe, so to speak. And we did this by looking at what the most trafficked pages on the website or in that particular product category were, relative to which pages were actually presented in the quick links. And we found that by virtue of the fact that the navigation menu had been built some time ago, the products or content links that were being presented no longer actually reflected what users were trying to look at. So the first thing that we did was to use Adobe Target simply to do an A/B test in order to validate that if we showed links that were more popular based on general traffic volume to those pages, would we increase utilization of those links and effective utilization of the navigation menu? Lo and behold, we were able to do so. Next, we started to look at how we could move away from a one-size-fits-all experience within the navigation and look at how key audience segments might want to be seeing different content or might find a different navigation experience more or less relevant. And one of the important ones for a bank is to look at it on the basis of their prospective versus existing customer audience. And so what we did again was to go back to Adobe Analytics and to create audience segments of new versus existing customers, and to look at the product and content engagement within that category on that basis, i.e. New customers likely to look at different content than existing customers. Lo and behold, the answer was yes. So as I mentioned, Adobe Target out of the box would have no concept of a new versus existing customer because it's not tracking information to that level of granularity. So what we did was share segments into the experience card from Adobe Analytics that defined a visitor as being new versus existing. And we did that by looking at whether or not they'd ever had an internet banking logon. And we targeted those two audiences with a test which tested the new, more relevant set of quick links that came out of the A/B test with a B version, which is a set of quick links based on what those audiences typically engage with. Lo and behold, again, we found that we were able to increase the level of engagement and ultimately product applications for the links that we were promoting. Next, we looked at enhancing the audiences further in Target by using information from a CDP, Tilium audience stream, and ingested into Adobe Target using the profile attributes that I mentioned. In order to constrain the set of quick links that were presented based on what the product holding of the customer actually was. And lo and behold, we yet again saw an increase in engagement. And finally, as a layer, I should say, below all of that, at a lower priority, we used auto personalization in order to algorithmically curate the best offer combination or the best set of links for all other visitors. And so we ended up with an experience that was highly relevant in the first instance because we used the testing features of the platform to create a good baseline, but had additional layers on top of that, which created a higher and higher level of relevance. Another example of how these features are being used is with Coden, who are the Denmark brand of a massive multinational insurance group, RSA. So they used these automated personalization features in order to look at, in a promotional spot on the homepage that had not a great click-through rate in the past, what combination of imagery, products, messages, etc., would actually be most compelling to each visitor. And the results that they were able to see were a 2x click-through rate, a 2x increase to the click-through rate on that promotional spot, which is pretty massive given the amount of traffic that the homepage got. Finally, we have a case study from an Australian brand called Red Balloon. Red Balloon are selling, they're an e-commerce company who are selling activity vouchers and providing the ability to make online bookings for those activities, like hot air ballooning, cooking classes, and so on. So Red Balloon are leveraging not just Adobe Target, but also another product from Adobe called Adobe Search and Promote, which is a product from Adobe that lets you create an algorithm to drive how products should be ranked, as indicated by the top sellers refinement that's been made. This set of products by default is shown based on a product algorithm that is weighting different factors like the amount of margin that Red Balloon will get from their products, or the amount of revenue, or the historical conversion rate, and so on. So leveraging Adobe Target and Adobe Search and Promote together, we looked at how we could use personalization in order to test different ranking factors or ranking algorithms that might be better or worse for different sets of visitors. So, for example, we found that geo-targeted ranking rules were effective because when we conducted analysis within analytics, we found that the average spend in each city was different, as were the types of products that were being looked at. And so based on geography, we could infer that it would be more or less effective to put a different set of products at the top. We looked at behavioral ranking rules as well. So if we could identify that based on analytics, that a specific product or set of products had been engaged with before, could we create a ranking rule which put more emphasis on that specific set of products? And yes, that was indeed, again, effective in increasing conversion rate. And we also tested changes to the ranking factors like evaluating whether for a newer product, which didn't yet have any sales history or conversion rate history to allow it to rank well, we could give it an artificial push in the first 30 days, 60 days that it exists on the website, in order that it could start to build up its own sales history, and then gradually reduce that push over time and let it stand on its own. And in doing so, ensure that where there were new products that would be popular, we got them to the top a lot faster. So those are some of the ways in which we have seen Adobe Target be used very effectively from the point of view of personalization out there in the market. And that actually concludes today's webinar. So thank you very much for your time, everyone. And if there are any questions, my email address is on the screen there, douglas.morris@ratiopartners.co.uk. Thank you.